Chapter 9. The Dream Takes Shape. And above all, watch with glittering eyes the whole world around you, because the greatest secrets are always hidden in the most unlikely places. Those who don't believe in magic will never find it. Roald Dahl. Two men came into Parkside Special Care Center, one of them claiming to be searching for a place to care for his aging mother who had Alzheimer's disease. Wearing jackets and no ties, they were trying hard to look casual. As Steve Winter showed the pair around Parkside, they fired questions at him, jotting his answers on pads encased in leather bindings. Their manner and the depth of their inquiries about Parkside services didn't square with normal behavior. As family members searched for suitable living arrangements for the memory impaired, emotion and uncertainty often overwhelmed them. Many were still struggling to comprehend basic facts about the disease that was slowly changing their loved one. When the two men said that they wanted to visit Lohar Lodge, the other memory care center Steve oversaw, Steve guessed they were state inspectors hoping to snag Parkside and Lohar in a bureaucratic trap. For years, regulators had been visiting him to challenge the two centers' unusual memory care programs. Steve played along with the ruse. After he finished escorting the men around both Parkside and Lohar Lodge, the two asked to meet with him privately. Steve took a deep breath and got ready for the blow. "Bring it on, State of California. I'm ready." Showing them into his office, he left the door open. "Parkside is the residence home," he explained to the visitors. "They can go anywhere they wish, even here. If you don't want anyone to hear us, keep your voices down." Both men made another note as they settled into chairs facing Steve's desk. The man whose mother had Alzheimer's disease, or so he had said, leaned forward. "We're starting an assisted living community for people with memory impairment," I said. "We've searched far and wide for the right person to take charge of resident care. We both agree you're the person we've been looking for. Will you join us?" Steve drew back in surprise. Then he smiled and said, "Thank you, but I'm happy right where I am." I leaned in closer beside him. Jim Smith sat forward too. Then I began to describe my vision of a place where people with memory impairment would thrive. Steve had never seen me before. He had never heard of me. He sat silently as the stranger voiced Steve's own thoughts, feelings, and dreams. When I finished speaking, Steve asked the only question that came to his mind. "Will you have pets?" "Yes, we love pets," I said. "We're going to have a lot of them." "How many is a lot?" "We're not putting any limits on the number, and we're going to have every kind of pet you can imagine. Come to work with us, and you can help us with pets." We all shared a laugh. The ice had been broken. We spent several hours comparing ideas and spinning scenarios. Anyone glancing into Steve's office would have thought these guys were the best of buddies. "What are you going to call your company?" Steve asked. "Silverado Senior Living," Jim and I told him. It was my idea. I was naming it after the Silverado Resort and Country Club in California's Napa Valley. The resort had offered both tennis and golf and a host of other activities and many amenities. They have something for everyone in the family to enjoy, regardless of age and interests, I said. That is exactly how it's going to be at our communities. It will be for everyone, residents and visitors, kids and adults alike. When Jim and I rose to leave, we asked Steve to think about our offer. "Don't decide right now. Just take some time to consider what we discussed." Steve had no intention of accepting. Nearly a decade had passed since he revolutionized care for people with Alzheimer's disease at Parkside Special Care Center. He had since brought the same changes to Lohar Lodge. When he closed his eyes, he could see each of the hundreds of residents he had known over the years. He remembered the moment of an activity, a friendship, the laughter of a child, or the warmth of a pet brought an individual to life. How could he even consider leaving a place that was so much a part of him? But in the days that followed, he found himself thinking about the way I spoke. Steve had never met anyone who had reflected in his own mind and sentiments in the purest passion the way I did. A few weeks later, Steve fished my card out of his desk and called me. He scheduled an appointment with Jim and I at our offices in Orange County, California. The three of us squeezed our chairs together in the small space and began talking for several hours. Not long after that meeting, he called me and Jim and told us he would come aboard. I went with my gut, Steve said. For the next year, Steve held two jobs, keeping his position as administrator at Parkside and Lohar during the day, and took the time to train his replacement. Working nights with Jim and I, he planned Silverado's residence care program. The owners of Parkside and Lohar understood what he was doing. The man who had designed their revolutionary memory care program wanted to stand before an empty frame again and fill it with his vision. During that time, Silverado Senior Living existed only in the minds of three men. Jim and I were searching for a building, perhaps a skilled nursing facility or mental health hospital, to turn into our first memory care community. One day, Steve received the call he had been expecting for 12 months. "Give your notice," I said. "We've got the place." Steve wrapped up his work at Parkside and Lohar Lodge and hugged residents and staff goodbye. Shortly after Steve turned in his keys, I called again. The deal had fallen through. Steve spent anxious days regretting what he thought could be the biggest mistake of his life. Then one afternoon, as Steve was working in his office, Jim and I strode in and said the deal was back on. Silverado was taking possession of the property that day. The three of us needed to get there as fast as possible. We piled into Steve's car and headed south to a nursing home in Escondido, California, where Silverado would take shape. "It's a pit," I told Steve, as he maneuvered through heavy traffic. "It can accommodate 110 people. Right now, there are only 20. It has a bad reputation. It's been through 2 bankruptcies." I described the cracks crisscrossing the floors, the lamps languishing with burnt-out bulbs, knee-high weeds sprouting in the backyard, chairs and sofas so worn that you'd fall through if you actually sat down, and a staff that wouldn't look anyone in the eye. As we drove, dark clouds overhead opened up, and an unexpected hail began to pound the highway. We pulled under an overpass to wait it out. "I hope this isn't an omen," Steve said, his apprehension apparent behind the joke. The facility certainly didn't meet the criteria we had set for our dream location, but after months of searching and fruitless negotiations, we felt it was now or never. We would have to make this work. For me, more was riding on this endeavor than just my dream. I had convinced a private equity firm to invest in the project. Jim and I had staked a great deal of our own money, and I was also placing personal financial guarantees on this new company. Those around us at the time say I never displayed anything but confidence. When we arrived at the nursing home, the administrator stormed down the dark hall towards us. She hurled a ring of keys at us as she passed and snarled, "Here, it's all yours." She slammed the front door on her way out. A moment later, we heard a car start and peel out of the parking lot. Coming into the half-lit lobby, we needed a few moments for our eyes to adjust. "Wait, where are the couch and chairs?" Jim asked. I scanned the area. The reception room furniture had vanished. Decrepit as it had been, its absence made the place ghostly. Hearing a faint noise, we pushed open a door marked "Dining Room." We found residents sitting around linoleum tables, wrath-like and silent. Many were in wheelchairs, their faces turned down to their laps. The sound we heard came from a corner of the room, where an employee was shuffling tableware in a plastic bin. A few residents were picking at their food, but most ignored it. Jim, Steve, and I approached the tables. The plate in front of each person held yellowing pieces of lettuce and a small scoop of macaroni salad. Steve drew in his breath sharply. He leaned down beside the resident nearest to him and said gently, "Hi, I'm Steve. Is this all you're having for dinner?" The woman didn't respond. He stood and pushed his way through double doors leading to the kitchen. A man in a dingy jacket was leaning against a counter. In his fury, Steve didn't introduce himself. "What are you serving?" he demanded. "Do you have anything decent for the residents to eat? Any meat? Anything with flavor?" "We stopped feeding them meat long ago. The owners ran out of money," he said in his defense. "We buy stale bread in bulk. A lot of nights we pour canned gravy over it and serve it to them as meatloaf." Steve pivoted and strode back into the dining room to Jim and I. We agreed this was not going to be the first meal on our watch. I kept an eye on things while Steve and Jim drove to the nearest McDonald's. Steve and Jim brought back bagfuls of hamburgers, chicken nuggets, and French fries for the residents. The fragrance emanating from the paper sacks had a powerful effect. Residents who had seemed barely awake as they slumped around the tables began stretching their hands out for the food. They smiled. Some spoke. Despite the sorry surroundings, the meal took on the air of a picnic. Steve arranged to bring supplies from Parkside Special Care Center to tide over the residents until he could order supplies. He also brought a small team of longtime employees who were eager to assist Steve in shaping his new venture. He had left on excellent terms. The owners were happy to help. Lori, the medical records staffer from Parkside, said, "There was nothing we wouldn't do for him." In those early days at Silverado, only the position of chef was available to Lori, so she learned how to cook and how to operate all the kitchen equipment. With the recipes from her mother, she multiplied the quantities by 10. Her cinnamon rolls became a resident favorite. Since Silverado could not afford to hire a dishwasher until occupancy reached 40 residents, Lori also handled that task. While Steve and a handful of employees focused on resident care, Jim and I set about renovating the place. Comfortable furniture, colorful paint and wallpaper, and sparkling cleanliness were our priorities. So were flowers, walking paths, and a playground for youngsters who visited. As they installed a chandelier in the dining room, the dreary room became a bright, inviting place where people lingered after meals to talk. We were surprised when 7 residents who had once needed assistance at mealtime began to eat on their own from the sheer pleasure and energy of being in that room. Ben was Silverado's first official new resident. Husky and over 6 feet tall, he had lost little of the strength that powered his college football career decades earlier. Ben came to Silverado from the hospital where he had angrily assaulted nurses and orderlies. As a result, his hands and feet were tied down to the gurney that brought him in. His wife walked beside him, weeping. Silverado agreed to accept Ben in spite of his violence. If he lashed out here and hurt someone, his wife wouldn't know where to turn next, because no other senior living community would take him. Steve did his best to reassure her. Silverado is his home now. Let's focus on getting him well. Observing Ben and reviewing his history, Steve and staff members were certain he was in physical pain. The abundance of psychotropic drugs in his body was aggravating his condition. No longer able to communicate through words in a way those around him could understand, he was expressing his anguish through punches and kicks. Freeing Ben from his restraints, the Silverado staff placed a mattress on the floor so he wouldn't hurt himself if he fell from his bed. They adjusted his pain medication and cut back on other drugs as well. Then they introduced him to Cassie, the community's resident Labrador retriever. Steve still smiles as he recalls the delicate dance between the two. At first, Cassie walked up to Ben as he reclined on his bed and pushed her nuzzle into his palms. Ben would pull back. Finally, one day, he reached out to pet her. When he stopped, she thrust her head at him again, but he turned away. A few days later, when Cassie approached him for another round of attention, Ben responded. About this time, Ben began to smile. Then he began to walk again, something the doctors had said would never happen. By the time he was able to sleep in a regular bed and sit comfortably in a chair, he had become the old Ben his family and friends had loved. He was a cheerful man who made it his responsibility to welcome visitors and newcomers to the community with Cassie by his side. What was happening at Silverado got noticed. After Ben moved in, new residents began to arrive regularly. Lori, who was there from the beginning, wasn't surprised when a waiting list developed. When people heard us speak about our vision, that we were there to provide the best memory care in the world, No one could doubt for a moment that what we were doing would succeed.